Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate this topic. It's so important that we remain the world's leader in innovation. It's what we've seen in the last 100 years with the United States leading the world, bringing an end to World War II, putting man on the moon, and us remaining that leader. It's certainly important that we continue to do that and make that a priority as a nation. Now, the context that makes it challenging, of course, is that every year we have deficit spending. We're looking at $22 trillion of debt, which is also a national security issue, becoming such. So the question for me becomes how do we accomplish this? And there's a couple areas of concern I want to point out. One is how do we ensure that the funding we do give towards science is going toward items of national interest? And I'll name a couple in the sense that there was a $1.3 million given to the University of Washington to research whether koozies could keep drinks cold. There was another one, another study for $500,000 that had to do with shrimps walking on submerged water, underwater treadmills. And so how do we make sure that the money we are allocating is going toward rightful purposes? And then the other area I think that's a major concern is with China becoming such a major power play. They're not innovating, but they are stealing our innovation to the tune of, some would say, 200 to 600 billion, which is actually more than we're spending in science right now. And so the picture I kind of have is that we have a bucket. We're being asked to kind of fill it up even more, but there's these holes in the bucket, and China actually has a bucket underneath it, and they're kind of taking it from us. And so the questions I have would be, what can we do to make sure that the funding we're getting is going toward national purposes? And then also, what can we do to ensure, especially at the university level where a lot of the theft is happening now, to ensure that we shore that up? And if I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to submit the IP Commission's 2019 review. Thank you. And with that, I'd hand it over to you all.
I just want to make two quick comments. First of all, trying to decide what research is in the national interest, I think, is always going to be difficult to do. Let me just give you one quick example. The Cas9 bacteria, which everyone knows now because it's used in the CRISPR process to edit the genome. And whole new industries are growing up now with the potential to now basically text edit genes for all sorts of purposes. That was done, discovering how that worked was research into obscure bacteria and what they were doing without any thought that it might someday be this incredible discovery that it could actually edit genes in the way that it does. And on the second one, I'll say that the best way for technology transfer is actually not patents. It is the students and the postdocs walking out of the research labs and going into industry. That is how ideas actually are most effectively transferred. It used to be that the students, no matter where they came from, went into our own industry. Now what's happening is they aren't staying here, they're going back to where they came from. So that's the problem we have now. If we were keeping the students here, we wouldn't be so worried about it.
I agree that is a problem, but at the same time, we have China hacking into our systems.
Yes,
I think it was 27 universities recently. I mean, they're stealing everything from shipping secrets to missile secrets to fertilizer recipes so that they can have better production in agriculture. So they're catching us, and if in my analogy, if we keep pouring money into this bucket without shoring up, I mean, we're in a sense funding their innovation as much as we are ours. So that's my concern.
I know, let me give a real quick answer. I think that your first point about the efficient allocation of federal investments to make sure it's really on the top science comes down to a good identification of the areas of science. Remember how stimulative federal investments are. They create new students and new So we have to make sure that the program calls that the agencies make are really clearly on areas of national priority need, because you're going to be creating new future capacity there. I think that the good news is that by and large, you're always going to see some outliers, and you're always going to see these kooky titles. The scientists don't do themselves any favors sometimes, but this is such an intensely competitive environment. These scientists are fighting for a very limited amount of funding. My experience has been that, any outlier or poorly allocated research quickly doesn't get renewed or funded. And of all the things to worry about, that efficiency is not the one that would be at top of my list. I do think Dr. McNutt has pointed out something. Look, we have to worry about our cybersecurity capabilities and this problem with exfiltration of data and information. But the one I worry about the most is the exfiltration of talent, because the data is basically scientific or technical knowledge that we've already created. And it's true, once that's gone, that's gone. But if the folks who are going to generate the next generation of talent aren't here, then we won't have anything that's worth exfiltrating in the future. So I think that talent, making sure that if these are knowledge-driven economies, we have the best talent here in this country is the competitive issue.
Two quick comments to build on that. One is, there's always this tension between focused, mission-driven research, whether it's, sending a person to the moon, or versus exploratory research. And I think we have to be careful the pendulum doesn't swing one way or the other, because the two are, at the end of the day, interdependent. And as Dr. McNutt said, often research projects don't deliver in the area, well, quite often don't deliver in the areas that you think. The second is, when we think about knowledge transfer in the industry, and people that I hire as scientists, I'm not hiring them for the knowledge of the project they were working on, and I have thousands of scientists. I'm actually hiring them for their problem-solving skills that they learned in the laboratories of institutions funded by Dr. McNutt or an institution like Dr. Gallagher's. Once they come into that environment, they're going to face new problems to solve, but their skills were transferred. This transfer of knowledge at the pace of change we're talking about is relatively short-lived. If you can't continue to iterate on it, it becomes obsolete. The estimate is about 50% of scientific knowledge is obsolete within about 5 years. And so it's old by the time, you finish your training, in my case, it's already old. So it is important to have that problem-solving approach.